Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
While awaiting her trial, Casey Anthony would spend her time in prison, as she had also been charged with 13 counts of fraud for writing bad checks from her former friend Amy Hazenga. Another thing that would happen prior to the trial is Judge Stan Strickland would give the prosecution permission to pursue the unalive penalty. But another thing that would happen concerning Judge Stan Strickland, evidence would actually start surfacing that Stan Strickland had released certain information to a blogger, Dave Kecknell, about information concerning the trial. Because of this, Stan Strickland would remove himself from the trial, and they would appoint a new judge for this trial, and that would be Judge Belvin Perry. Another thing that would happen leading up to the trial is, it's not sure why, but Cindy Anthony would completely jump ship again, and this time stand completely behind her daughter, Casey Anthony. She would also confirm in news interviews that not only was she standing behind her daughter, but she believed that her daughter was completely innocent. And would even go any further and say that not only did she believe she was innocent, but would actually take the stand in defense for her daughter. Now, in May of 2011, the trial would begin, and they would charge Casey Anthony for multiple charges. One charge for child murder, which was a capital offense, which was pursuing the unalive penalty. One count of child endangerment, and 4 counts of lying to the police. The trial would take place in Files County, about 100 miles outside of Orange County. And the juror would consist of 5 men and 7 women. As the trial would begin, the prosecution would start with their opening statements, as all trials do. And what the prosecution would start with would be what they believe had happened to Kaylee Anthony, which I will not be discussing in this video, as I had pretty much done that in the previous video. So if you want to kind of find out what exactly the prosecution believed happened to Kaylee Anthony, check out that video. But they would bring their findings to the juror and would try to express how they believed that Casey Anthony had unalived her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. But this would not be the slam dunk that the prosecution had hoped it to be. Mainly because in Jose Baez's opening statement, he would drop a bomb in the courtroom. And from the very beginning of the opening statement by Jose Baez, everyone who was tuning in for this trial, because it had gained so much media coverage, people knew that this was not going to be one normal court case trial. Jose Baez knew as a defense attorney that he didn't necessarily need to prove that Casey Anthony was innocent. But all he would have to do is sow enough doubt in the jurors' minds to make them doubt that she was capable of doing this crime. And that's exactly what he would do. And one of the things that he would do in this trial is pulling one of the oldest tricks in the book, and that is throw someone under the bus. And that someone would be none other than Casey's father, George Anthony. And being that Cindy stood by her daughter this entire time, I can only imagine that George was just as shocked at this information in the trial, just as much as we were as we watched it on the television. Jose Baez would paint a picture that Casey Anthony was a very exhausted mother, and would say on the day of Kaylee Anthony's unaliving, she would be taking a nap with her daughter, where her daughter would slip out from underneath her arms, to which she would be woken up by her father looking for his granddaughter. And they would look all over the house, and George Anthony would find his granddaughter unalive in the family pool, to where he would be carrying Casey Anthony's daughter's limp body and be screaming at her, "Look what you've done," and would be screaming, "Your mother will never forgive you when she finds out what you've done." But in the same instance, would turn around and say, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of everything." Jose would add and say that Casey would listen to her father because her father had been a police officer. and would even go and say George Anthony would tell Casey that if the police found out about this happening to your daughter, you will go to prison for the rest of your life for child neglect. The prosecution would find this very unbelievable and would bring up the fact that how Casey had acted after her daughter had been unalive. She did not act like someone that was grieving the loss of her daughter, or any normal mother for that matter. To which Jose Baez would drop another bomb. He would say, and I quote, "On June 16th, 2008, Casey had done what she had done her whole life, or part of it, hiding her real pain." Jose would go even farther and say that from a very young age, at 8 years old, Casey had been taught to lie by her father, and would claim that Casey Anthony had been SA'd by her father since she was 8 years old, which he would use as a way to explain the amount of lies that Casey had told over the period of time that she had been involved with the Orange County Police. And Jose Baez would paint a very graphic picture in the courtroom. To quote Jose Baez, he would claim it would be a completely normal day for 12 or 13-year-old Casey Anthony to be at home with her father's eggplant in her mouth, and then return to school as if nothing had happened. And this very graphic picture that Jose Baez would paint for the courtroom would start sowing the doubt within the courtroom. And this particular bombshell that Jose would drop not only would shock the courtroom, it would shock the world, and it would inevitably be the very bomb that would completely separate the Anthony family. Many people believe, and I am one of them, as no one really bought the whole SA story that Casey brought in the defense on that day. Mainly because Casey Anthony was known as being a pathological liar, and because there was no definitive proof that George Anthony ever SA'd his daughter. It just fell on deaf ears for a lot of us. Now, because the prosecution was trying to push for the unalive penalty, they wanted to prove that Casey Anthony was not a good person, and also wanted to paint the picture that she had unalived her daughter. One of the ways they would do that is they would bring the testimonies of various people that had been around Casey Anthony during those 31 days her daughter was missing. And these people would include Tony Lazaro, Ricardo Morales, and Jeffrey Hopkins. And they would go over her actions and how she had acted during the 31 days that Kaylee was unalive. The defense wouldn't really pay a lot of attention to these claims, as because it would coincide with the statement that Jose Baez had made earlier about how things could go on in her home, and she would go to her friends at school and act like nothing was wrong. But Jose Baez would ask one question to each and every person that testified on the stand. And that question would be, was Casey Anthony, in your eyes, a good mother? And unfortunately for the prosecution, every single person on the stand would say, well, yes, when Kaylee Anthony was alive, Casey Anthony was a phenomenal mother. So these testimonies would not be as successful as the prosecution had hoped. Now, the next part that the prosecution would try to bring up would be the evidence found in Casey Anthony's car, or more specifically, how she acted during that week she was gone, or when Kaylee Anthony was unalive. And if they looked over the security footage of cameras of her going to the store or the groceries, or just getting things and putting them in her car, and proving that she put them in the back seat versus the trunk, it could prove that she had actually had Kaylee's body in the trunk of the car, which would prove that she had unalived her own daughter, versus the story that the defense was going with. But once again, the prosecution would find out that this would not be the slam dunk that they had hoped.